Good morning, guys. It's morning where I am. I'm doing another video. This will be the part two to the video I did yesterday about Richard Shaver and the underground. Um, after listening to it, I had two important things I kind of forgot to point out, and I'm going to right now. They'll become the focal point of most of my videos. Well, first, and to a lesser degree, was the fact that as we have here, you can see that he was able to look with the Visiray, Richard Shaver, using these beams, basically imaging beams, but what they call a Visiray or vision ray, and they they could see these what he called whites, or they were freets, or basically be some sort of beings. Now, could they be the Greys or some other more demonic looking being? We don't totally know. Could even be some form of the Vril lizards. Although I think he would have said that. I think it's probably some sort of, like gnome or goblin type being. But he called them a freets. And here the above in this picture I'm showing, it describes how he could see what looked like a hell. I mean, they were boiling them in fluids and had them swinging from hooks, and they were on spikes, and they were torturing him with hammers. And then the thing about that is they could bring him back to life from the very edges of death, from the very throes of death. So they would torture him till they were just about dead, and then they would bring him back to life with these beneficial rays, or Ben rays, as they called them. And so my point here for that is this is where the medbed technology came from. They have the technology to sustain your life, to keep you alive, to even keep you alive for much longer time period, like hundreds of years, like the old beings. Like, because in the old days, the kings would reign for hundreds of years. Sumerian kings ran for hundreds of years, and there's other evidence of that and proof of that in the documentation of like Samaria and other, I think, Egyptian pharaohs as well, and more than likely Tatarian rulers. I don't know too much about that, but all these ultra ultra civilizations that have existed either in the past or outside of our normal matrix that we're living in now. Generally, these beings live for a long time. Even the dogman and the Sasquatch are living for hundreds of years. So they must be able to block this disintegrant energy. And so anyway, this is the point I wanted to make. So it sort of kind of went by unnoticed yesterday that these beings were able to do that and to keep these people alive. And then the other point that I wanted to make was that the other point that needed to be made was the fact that um, these beings that are down there now have turned and changed and are evil. And the whole point of these two videos is really to point out that they're torturing people down there. That's their sport. That's like their part of their culture. It's a culture of death. It's a death cult. It's a death culture, and they torture and maim for joy and pleasure and for entertainment. But the point here, the main point, is that to be down there, you also have to maim, torture, and kill. Because if you don't, and if you don't at least pretend like you're enjoying it, then you will become, they will come and get you, and you'll become their next victim in this torturing and killing and maiming of you. And that could go on for years and years. And this is where the idea of hell came from. And one of these underground places is actually named Hell. It was actually named the city of hell, and that's, I believe, is under and close by Helsinki. That's why they call Helsinki Helsinki. Even even the Richard Shaver stories talk about, they have a story that's very close by there, I believe, in the story. Okay, so let's move along, and so now we've established those two things. They can keep people alive, and it's a culture, a cult of death. Now, that's why you see on the surface world the same thing. And actually, in these cloning chambers, they go down into the cloning chamber. Some are on the surface, and some are just under the surface. Some are in the deep underground military bases. It just depends. And for the surface people, it's a prestigious affair to be able to go and to be invited into these places. And as you'll soon find out, hopefully in this video that I can bring this out, they're palaces. There used to be palaces for learning and for pleasure and for dancing and for all this years and years ago, back in the Atlan days. But now it's being used as a torture palace, and some of them have stadiums in it. And even Richard Shaver talks about that. I'm even going to show. I'd like to show some lyrics from "Caring is Creepy," and let's look at these lyrics real quick. This is just from an innocuous band called the Shins, who I love. But James Mercer of the Shins went to Tavistock Institute. I think it was on the East Coast somewhere, possibly Kentucky. And so that's the connection. So, the Tavistock group is what David Icke calls the left-hand group, or the tiptoe into totalitarianism. The right-hand group, the Republican group, or the right-wing groups are the groups that push the NWO, up until now, the NWO agenda, forcefully, quickly, while the left-hand group is the same, but they play each other like they're against each other, but really they're for the same common goal. The NWO, New World Order, full control of everyone across the world, one money, one religion, and just full control, and evil, like basically communism. I think what's happening right now is that all of that's going to happen, but whether or not it's going to be communism or freedom, it's a dangerous game they're playing, and I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing. I don't agree with a lot of things, but I'm just pointing out what we're seeing. So anyway, this is Caring is Creepy, and I believe that what's going on here is they actually wrote lyrics to what he saw in the underground chambers. So tell me if this doesn't sound like something like somebody would be thinking if they were pretending to be evil, but they weren't, and they were sitting up in the stadiums having to watch somebody else be tortured and killed. Quite often they're cloned, quite often a real person, but that's the legend of the underground cloning chambers. Anyway, here it is. I think I'll go home and mull this over before I cram it down my throat. Has at long last its colossal masses broken up into bits in my moat. I think he's learning that this is real. Lift the mattresses off the floor, walk the cramps off, go meander in the cold, hail to your dark skin, hide in the fact you're dead again. Could this be a reference to they've cloned him, you're in the cloning chamber? Underneath the power line seeking shade, down in the underground, I would think. Far above, when they're down in the underground, far above are the icy heights that contain all reason. So above us is the surface world. And down here in the underground, it's a luscious mix of words and tricks that let us bet when we should fall. We shouldn't be down there. On rocks I dreamt of where we stepped. And the whole mess of roads we're now on. The underground is a cacophony of tunnels and corridors. Hold your glass up, hold it in. This is when they're sitting maybe in the stadium seats watching the torture. Never betray the way you've always known it is. One day I'll be wondering how. I got so old just wondering how. I never got cold wearing nothing in the snow. I just added this because it was just something I thought when I read these lyrics. Hold your glass up, hold it in. Never betray the way you've always known it is. You've always known it was like this, but you can't talk about this now, or you'll become a victim too. And all these squawking birds won't quit. Building nothing but laying bricks. I find that interesting. Bricks are definitely in the underground. Squawking birds, could that be a reference to these reptiles? It's funny because there's a story of I'm going sideways in this, which I often do in these videos, but there's a story of a whole family that was killed years ago in Scandinavia. Um, Let me see here. Let's see if I can bring this up. I forget what it's called. The Scandinavian family murder. Um, I don't think that's it. Scandinavian farm family murder. Let's see if I can bring this up. The Hinterkaifeck murders, right? So the Hinterkaifeck murders. When you actually dive really deep into this, you find that possibly a being came up and took them all out to the barn one by one and killed them. They were killed in a very horrific and strange way. I think they had holes in the top of their head. And I think what I ended up, I read and read all kinds of stuff about this. And what I gleaned was they did find these tracks, what would look like bird tracks, and that recently, just before these murders, they had seen some sort of gigantic bird type being, birds being reptiles, a type of reptiles. And this is not the first reference to birds being aliens or interdimensional beings or whatever, extraterrestrial beings outside our known world, or what I call our matrix. Okay, so let's get back to Richard Shaver. That was kind of a side junk there, wasn't it? Okay, so the two main things that we want to take out of this, just as a quick review, is that they have the technology to heal us with beneficial rays and frequency, which is what Tesla talks about, and how the U.S. Army or the U.S. military made med beds, holographic med beds. Is also, the story does go that it was given to us by off-worlders, so I'm sure it's been perfected. I mean, let's face it, what's going on here is they're stealing the equipment that these beings, these negative beings that are down in the underground, have stolen the equipment, but they also live around the equipment. The equipment is messing them up because it hasn't been cleaned, and so it's giving off this excess disintegrant energy. So not the good integrant energy, disintegrant energy. I'm sorry I have to keep using that weird word, these two weird words, but that is what Richard Shaver called it. And as we learn more of ray technology and frequency, we'll learn that there is like a light frequency and a dark frequency, one that can add chi to you, and one that can, I don't know, either take the chi away, or it's a bad frequency and will wither you up and die like a plant. And the other thing that we want to talk about is that it's the culture of torture. So two things: they have the technology to not only see through rock and to kill you from a distance, but they have the technology to keep you alive and to create new life. There are bas reliefs in Samaria that talk about how they are doing that with ray technology, frequency and light. And they also, now, the beings that have taken over, the Ifrits, the Jinn, the goblins, the gnomes, whatever it is, the deros. Don't forget about the deros, not the teros, which are good beings down there, with basically humans. The deros are what used to be human and have turned, because they have so much disintegrant energy and heavy metal in their ego centers of their brain, that they're turned into they're evil. And apparently, and the body can change. So the body's changing over time, living for years next to these machines in the underground. Okay, so, whoops, I should go back to my picture. Just gonna put this interesting picture up here. You guys can look at that. That is, there's gonna be aliens, and they're going to build ships. There's going to be beings that live under the water, and they're going to build ships accordingly. Okay, so today I'm just going to finish up the book 3 of Richard Shaver. I forget what the story, the name of this particular story. It doesn't have a name actually, but it's the one with Bar Mihat and the Jurgamunder. So as they go along, he meets, and I wanted to point out, it's a strange story because remember we were talking about how there was fecund life. It never stopped dying. Nothing died. Never, everything was living. But yet, let's see here. We can see here. Oops. I'm sitting in my car. We're gonna see that he meets up with a woman, and she was not of the Atlan group. Okay, so here, let's take a look at this. Take a photo of that. Okay, so now this is when Garm is talking to. But I was just going to briefly say they meet a woman in the forest. She's not of the Atlans, but she's got an anti-gravity pack on her back, which apparently this is quite common. She's rolling around with an anti-gravity pack. Here it is, the story here. But they save her from a gigantic reptile, a serpent, a snake. Not as big as the Jorgamunder, but it was in the jungle, like some sort of anaconda, but probably bigger because these trees are like 7 miles tall. It doesn't say how tall Bar Mihad is. Okay, so she was wearing an anti-gravity pack, it says here, and she was trying to escape the swing head of a monster reptile whose coils laid over the rude path. Now, I find this, I'm just adding this really quick, I find this fascinating because he talks about how nothing was dying yet. Here, some of these beasts were trying to kill, I guess, to eat you. So there was some sort of death. So something had changed from when the first guy had touched down to this point. So now we have these gigantic, basically monsters that are growing, to ginormous proportions, and they are hunting things. And even here, the worm Garm says that that's the reason they're going to have to take Garm out, because he's wiping out a lot of Africa with his 1,000-mile long tentacles and stuff, I think is what they're saying. So anyway, let's take a look at this. This is when Garm is talking to Bar Mihat through the telog device that he has on his head. It says they mean to take over the earth and to develop they mean to take over the earth and to develop fecundly. They come from a quarantine planet. Now remember, quarantine planets are when there's DER. In other words, there's disintegrate energy radiation, DER, DER. We still use that prefix to this day. And here it says that, and have somehow eluded the Atlan DER patrols. They believe they can win over the Mu folk. Now, who are these? So we're going to find out what they look like. They believe they can win over the Mu folk, which is the Atlans, before help can be called in from greater space against them. Were the Mu folk the Atlans, or were the Mu folk the beings, the humanoids that were already here on the planet before the Atlans showed up? That's what I'm starting to see here. At least that's the way Richard Shaver's writing. This is the only other text that we really have that talk about Atlantis like this is the writings of I can't think of his name now. Bloody hell, Gacy, Edgar Gacy, and he channeled it. And I do have some of Edgar Gacy's writing, so in the future I will look that up. And we can probably look it up today, maybe, on the internet. Anyway, so let's get back to this. How they expect to hold Mu against the entire Atlan Space Navy once they have won Mu, I fail to understand. Again, there's an interesting reference to Space Navy because I haven't talked about this too much, but in Crater Earth theory, we believe it's they believe it's a larger planetoid. We're in a crater. It's surrounded by ice, which satisfies the the globe model and the flat Earth model. But also in this crater Earth model, is outside the crater is much more water. There's a dome over the crater, possibly more than one. Could it be energetic? Could it be solid? We don't know. Um, and when we look through it to the stars, that could that be a reflection of the greater Earth? I'm not thinking cr- this crater Earth theory of reflection from the outer layers, from these stars and what we see in the night heavens to what's is actually a plasmatic reflection of where we are down here in a larger globe or larger sphere or larger plane. We don't know, but when we look through there and we see the stars and you magnify them, it looks like they're in water. So I just wanted to add that really quickly. So here we go, the Atlas Space Navy. They could have said the Space Army or the Space Air Force. It would have made this. Why the Navy? Why is it always the Navy? Because even the secret space program is from the Navy. And the first things they used in space were reconditioned submarines that they retrofitted with anti-gravity. So anyway, let's get back to it. How they expect to hold Mu against the entire Atlas Space Navy once they have won Mu, I fail to understand. But they are stupid despite their mechanisms of power. Keep that in mind, they're stupid. And perhaps they think not of it, or expect by crafty trickery to cheat the Atlans into letting them alone on Mu. Well, an idea, this is Garm, the great Juggermunder was talking to him, the great worm or serpent. An idea flashed into my mind as I stood staring at Garm's vast head, looking into his fierce elder eyes, twin greenish silver moons flickering through seawater. Garm? This is important. In the caverns where we bred life forms, this is Barmhiat talking, our technicians have a way of removing the brain from an animal, a living brain, and putting it into a metal bottle where it lives on, fed by fluid foods and synthetic blood. Okay, so see, they have this technology. And you've seen this in kind of kooky science fiction movies where they keep a brain alive in a jar. You know that joke all the time. Where did that come from? Well, it's shades of the truth, always. Shades of the past. Anyway, we keep it alive in synthetic blood. Since you are grown too big for this earth, will you consent that we may put your brain into a bottle and keep it for a record of the past? You have certain wisdoms, he goes on, which you can teach youth, and you like the young, laughter-filled folk of our Mu people. Okay, so he is considering the Atlans as Mu people. Later, and again, he said there was three types: Atlans, the Titans, and the Nortons. Later, after you have grown accustomed to our ways on land, you will have many friends, and later on, yet some colonizing expedition can take you with them and plant your living brain into a young reptile on some other planet. Aha, so this is what I wanted to talk about yesterday. Take a photo of that. So this is what I wanted to talk about. God, my dumb fingers in the way all the time. Okay. So anyway, he says, you live your life over and over again. Do the Durman offer you anything of like value? And in return for this prolongation of your life, will you then aid us against them? So he's making a pact with Jorgamunder, the gigantic worm that's encircling the earth. So it didn't have to eat himself like the Ouroboros. They would take his brain out and save him. I mean, that sounds awesome. And to me, it shows their nobleness, their willingness to keep things alive. Because back then one of the worst things that you could do was to die or to kill. The worst thing you could do was to kill. Murder was always the number one. Thou shalt not kill. You know, it's funny that's one of the first things that's in the Ten Commandments. Where did we get those 10 commandments? Was it from one of these beings that came back? Now remember, once the sun goes to a Dur planet, it becomes a quarantine planet. We didn't read about this, but it is in this book. So if you go get this book, you'll read about it. We are in a quarantine planet. We've heard that multiple times from aliens and interdimensionals and extraterrestrials, off-worlders. They tell us that all the time. We're trying to figure out why. This is why. We're in a quarantine planet. Not only because we're a bunch of lunatics with guns and everything we do is, negative, and we turn everything into a weapon. The reason is because we're on a dirt planet. We're being led by durs, by these deros. And the deros are in the underground. The durs, I would call the durs up top. People like the Clintons, the Bushes, the Nazis. Well, I don't know about the Nazis. All the negative people, the Nazis, the communists, everybody, all these hideous people today, like Soros, and they all, and Clinton, they all practice black magic. All right, they're all in touch with these deros and the Afrits, the jinn, all of these beings that are living, that can live just outside our visible light spectrum. The reptiles as well, they can live outside in between time. They can phase in and phase out of our physical matrix. There is a scientific explanation for it. Some of it's organically done, and some of it's done mechanically. Some of it's done spiritually. Okay, so anyways, the worm comes down here and says, I accept your offer. And I would fain live on and on in your brave new worlds, what else I might never visit. I am ready to accompany you when you give me the word that you are ready to attack the interlopers from a quarantine planet. I dislike their warring and resent bitterly that the people of Mu must be forced into battles because of them. Yet, bar Mihad of Thor, so he's a offspring of Thor, the great Thor, I am your ally against them. And in this story, they talk about, some of the other lands. I forget the one, Asgard of Thor. Okay, so then we come back here and this is where he meets the girl, and she's cruising around in an anti-gravity pack. They all had them. They enabled us to rise above the considerable height above the ground, which is a great advantage in entering the jungle. So this jungle land was a place that they didn't go into. Now, what's interesting, I feel like, is a validation or a confirmation of this is in the Edgar Gacy files. He would channel, I don't know if he was channeling it. He would just go into a delta state, and he didn't know what he was writing, but he would write all this, or his wife would write it, and he would talk about it. And he didn't even know what he was saying because he was in this deep, deep theta state, a delta state, where you're basically asleep. And this is a great way of getting spiritual connection. Anyway, so he talked about what brought down Atlantis. Now, I don't know. I believe it was the third Atlantis. There's at least three Atlantises and maybe even the fourth, Tartaria. Maybe Tartaria was part of one of those Atlantises. And three great destructions of three great cataclysms, mainly caused by the technology of Atlantis, and more than likely the failing minds of the people who thought, they were getting they were getting disintegrate energy put into their radiation, put into their minds, and it was changing them, and they became selfish and things like that. But Gacy talked about the animals was what was destroying Atlantis, and they're having to spend so much effort into battling these animals. Well, were these animals coming out of this dark jungle, this wild land that Richard Shaver is talking about here, that they didn't even go into, this story is barely one of the first times they went into what they call the dark lands. And here we have giant reptiles. In fact, he's got a giant reptile helping him. We're about to see they're going to fight giant reptiles, and they send a bunch of animals at them in an attack. And these animals had mechanisms of death. It was glass mixed with listen to this, no joke, can't make this up. he described glass projectiles that had venom in it, and basically like little needles of glass with venom in it, and those were somehow attached to the animals. And now I'm assuming like, elephants and maybe bears and maybe, who knows, maybe the dog man. And these would have been giant beings. Now remember, some of these animals were different back then, especially I believe there was a thing called the dog bear. And I believe that's where dogs really came from, is from bears, not from cats. Because modern day science will tell you they came from cats, which, no way. They're totally separate animals. And I think actually the felines and the dogs both had high intelligence. I think all animals at some point, whether they were on four legs or on two, are used to be highly intelligent. And I still think, and I think even animals are evolving today because our sun is changing again. So anyway, that just goes on to show how he met her. She had an anti-gravity pack that's very interesting. They're in the dark forest. Okay, so let's check this out real quick. This is she's gonna go on to describe them. Okay, so you must be Bar Mihat, she said, ignoring my query. He's asking her, do you know the hidden entrenchments of my enemy? I am indeed Bar Mihat of Thora. Then I am for you. I owe you my life. I belong to the forest people. This is the girl that had an anti-gravity pack, but she wasn't part of Atlan. She had escaped from Atlan somehow. For what reason, I can't remember. Of whom you must know. We are outlaws, you see, outlaws, and hide away always from such as you. I mean, it was brought to my attention that Atlantis might have been, a technological nightmare. It might not be the paradise that I originally thought it was, but certainly having that ability would make it be an adventure anyways, especially where we are now. We're basically stone age compared to these people. Anyway, it says, we are outlaws and hide always from such as you. Among us came, not too many years ago, great ships with many guns. Okay, so they're a warring tribe. Now, it's an interesting, I'll quickly point out that it's Orion, the Orion group in the Orion area, that has been warring for millenniums. That's in the legend of the Offworlders. Like David Icke talks about that, and Corey Good and David Wilcock and some others talk about the Orion group. And could the Orion group be reptiles and constantly warring? Could there be these humanoids that are battling against the reptiles there? Could that be what the war is? Anyway, we don't know, but it's interesting to point out that they came from a quarantine planet with guns, and they're all about warring. She says, they are not like us. They have skins colored and blotched like lizards. There you go, they're reptiles, you see. Like the chameleon lizards. Next page. It's hard to do this and take a photo. Okay. Jeez, I just lost my place. Okay, I'm struggling with this, guys. I'm sorry. Oh, good, I found it. Okay, so, okay, here we go. Back to page 68. Somewhat on the order, and by the way, you can order these books on Amazon. Just look up Richard Shaver. It's volumes 1. Volumes 1 through 7. There's 7 books. I highly recommend buying all of them. At some point in the future, I'm going to redo all the books and put them in sequential order of time, because he kind of jumps around. He jumps from like the 30s, the 40s to the 100, 200 years ago to like 10,000 years ago. All right, getting back to her describing it. So she says that they have skins that are colored in blotches like lizards, like the chameleon lizards. The reptiles I've seen, humanoid reptiles that were trying to control me. Another video I'll talk about all the paranormal experiences I've had. I'll go through them one by one, but suffice to say, one time I did see reptiles that were in an underground room. It looked like I just saw them for a second. I was able to see through space and time at my local space time, and it had a vision going through basically into where they were. I think they were trying to control me. They were surprised that I could see them. About 3 or 4 of them standing around. They were tall, 7 foot, 8 feet, but they were the underlings. But they had shiny, bright green skin. You know, the typical waxy, almost wet-looking type reptilian skin. I didn't get too much more than that. That's all. But I can confirm that that is what I've seen. Somewhat on the order of man are they, with 4 limbs. Okay. So I'm assuming 2 arms and 2 legs. Their web feet have prehensile toes, and their hands are long-fingered. They have long fleshy tail that tapers to a whip-like point hanging from their rumps. They have large flat heads, and their eyes are lidless and reptilian, and are covered with a translucent membrane for protection. They got reptile eyes. Oh, how evilly red those eyes can glitter. Well, they're red. And they can change, which is exactly what some of these guys that talk about the dogman, and basically the dogman can change the color of its eyes. It changes when it's angry, and it can light them up. And this is all organically, and there is scientific evidence of this. Their features, maiden, do they resemble men? Oh no, Barhi. Their noses are small and flat, and their mouths are wide. They have no chins, and their teeth are heavy fangs. Oh, they are most horrible to look upon. Okay, so they're basically reptiles, and they eat us, and they want to eat us. And so even back then, they were fighting. Okay, so let's get under the... Keep going here, and we can get out of this book and get into some more interesting stuff. I'm at 37 minutes right now. Might have to do another quick video. I like to keep them at around, between 25 and 45 minutes. Okay, I'm really sorry for the lighting on this. I'm doing my best here. God, I'm not doing a very good job. I'm sorry, guys. But I'm just up at the lake today. Anyway, okay, so here we go. I cannot... They're very evil, and some things they do make me so fearful that I fled into the deeper forest that I might not see them no more. I cannot sleep, yet for thinking of their horrible life, their disgusting mottled bodies, the stink of them. They smell whenever somebody comes in contact with these devils from the underground, these reptiles. They smell like sulfur, fire, and brimstone. And there's other stories, recent stories that I've just heard, where they're so far down in the deep. The farther down you go, the more off-world it is, into the deep underground military bases, and to the point where they own the dump down there, and they go so far down there because they wanted to be in an atmosphere of it's like, I forget what they called it. I can't think of the name of it now, but it's so acidic and so that humans couldn't even live in that environment. It's methane and some other things. Okay, so that's the kind of, and they smell like that because, well, they eat raw meat, and it has to be live. They get high on it. This is where adrenochrome comes from. So you can see this is how we're building a case, a pretty strong case, as to how the underground is controlling the surface world, because the surface world is mimicking these idiots, right? And that's what's going on. They're mimicking them. They're probably they've either put the vril lizard in their eye, and they're now just a shell, and they're controlled by a reptilian parasite and living by the hive mind, or being rode R-O, by the hive mind of this new group of people, the reptiles, that have usurped the Atlanteans tens of thousands of years ago. right? And have taken over slowly started taking over and destroying and hiding all the Atlantean buildings, even here on the surface. Buildings like the White House, Vatican, uh, the Palace of Versailles, all these um, all the castles in London, especially the I can't think of the Buckingham Palace, and all those. I can assure you, I'll bet every one of those places has an entryway into the underground. Possibly they've been sealed up, but they have abilities to get to the underground. A lot of buildings in New York, especially the older buildings, were part of this Atlantean design. Anything that's sort of that postmodern, like the 20s look, I can't think of the name of it now, the architectural style of that. But anyways, because I forget who was. It's actually Richard Shaver and David Icke both talked about being able to go, and David Wilcock talked about going into these buildings, and there'd be elevators. You'd push a button, and if you knew what to do, and you had a certain pass or whatever it was, the elevator would keep going down into the underground. There you would catch the maglev and in the tunnels, and then you would go. In the old days, you go down there and get what Richard Shaver would called a rollat, and that was basically the very first type of flying saucer. Well, not the first type. It was just a design that was able to go through these tunnels. It was kind of like described, like kind of like a George Jetson looking thing with glass over the top. Anyways, so so we can see that these are the reptiles. So the reptiles, and here we go at the bottom of the page. So he got one of the deros. They had spotted a dero hidden like a chameleon against a dark tree trunk. So they're able to change. The faint patterning of his lizard-like skin betraying him. So again, here it is, invisibility. Our man had overpowered him, although he was armed with a projectile weapon. And he was indeed, as he had described. I examined his weapon with interest. It was a glass-like gun activated by air pressure and fired a tiny, brittle, venom-filled needle that broke on contact, releasing the poison into the veins of the victim. One of the great cats that infrequently lurked near the confines of the forest gave me a chance to test the poison. Well, he fired the gun. The cat whirled and then fell as if paralyzed. We saw that it still lived but was incapable of any action. What a way to die. I mean, that's exactly what the zombie, what is it, the zombie wasp does? Oh, well, here he is. He's talking about it. The very next page, he talks about it. Jeez, that's so funny. It's so crazy. So you guys will just have to bear with me here on these pages. But here he talks about the wasp venom, that it permanently paralyzes the victim. It stings a spider, and when it destroys the nervous system, but leaving the spider living, perhaps conscious, to be eaten later alive by the wasp grub. A system of food storage. Okay, so there's only two types of beings on our known planet. Well, really just one that we know of. I'm not including the reptile nation. Just just regular normie, animal list. God, I can't. My diction today is so bad. But it's the only beings that we know of that will take over other beings and war with them are insects. So and here we got these reptiles basically acting like insects. So it makes me wonder. And there's other stories that the reptiles are being run by an AI. The AI mimics, basically the hive mind of insects. So surely there's something to all this. So anyways, that's basically all I wanted to talk about with Richard Shaver. Although we're all going to move into this last story just for this video. And this story is the story, and I'm going to do I'll start another video, so I'll end it here. But this next story that's coming up, and then I'll go into Donald Marshall, and we'll be off the books and the wavy camera holding. I'm very sorry. But mainly this is just for listening. You could look at my video and maybe read along. But go ahead and get the books yourself. But the next story is going to be about, flash forward to a more recent day. They're speaking slang, so I think it's sometime after the 20s. And basically what this is going to show is that every year there's all the families and groups, negative beings of the underworld, gather in one specific place. And this particular place is called the Stem, which is next to, underneath New York, a gigantic city underneath New York that they control, like a crime family. And they call it the Stem because they'd closed off all the other accesses to the surface world, and the ones that do go to the surface world are completely controlled and regulated, like any other black market, where going in and going out will cost you a toll, and only the select few can. And everybody in the underground now is, well, not everybody, as you'll see, but because they've taken slaves, and the slaves aren't evil, but all these crime bosses are. And the Stem is underneath, the Stem City is underneath. It used to be called something else, but they call it the Stem. And it's underneath because it's like it's a narrowed down stem, wine glass connection to the surface world, where they bring in trucks. And they've been bringing trucks and goods from the surface world into the underground for years and years, much longer than hundreds, thousands of years. They've always been doing it. It's all, but as far as what we call our normie civilization, air quotes are, it's been going on for hundreds of years because they want that technology, and they're trading with these deros. And these surface people have become like the deros if they aren't already affected. They're killing people in sacrifices to these other beings. They eat their meat just like the deros do down there. They drink their blood to try to make them young again, which is there's pedophilia going on. It's all, and it's all been started because of, as Richard Savers says, because the sun is poisoning everyone into their ego centers. Plus, they're following bad examples of these other civilizations, off-world civilizations that have come here, like the reptiles, and some that have changed in the underground. They may as well be off-world. They're inner world, as you would say, underworld. And so all these strange beings that are humanoid, but that aren't the humans of goodly, godly behavior like that we aspire to be here. Oh, what a complicated and crazy world we live in. The truth is far stranger than fiction would ever allow. So, anyways, you don't have to believe any of this stuff, but it's all here, and I'm just showing you what my research has showed me. Okay, let's get to the next video. See you then.